This program is made possible by the support of Delta Dental, Quick Trip, Marshfield Clinic Health System, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association. Watch WisconsinEye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363 and at wiseye.org.
Committee, and we are here to talk about public schools and why they are as important as they are. Republicans are shocked because we actually had a governor who started his budget process by making sure that schools were properly funded, by making sure that special education had the money it needed in order for the teachers to do the job that they are supposed to do. And the idea that the Republicans have the audacity to talk about how great the economy is in Wisconsin thanks to their tax policies, and then turn around and cut what Governor Evers has proposed in special education funding by 84% is ridiculous. Yesterday they were cutting it by 91%. Today it's only 84%. They're still failing. Our Wisconsin schools, our Wisconsin families, and our kids who are in special education programs around the state. And the idea that they're cutting what Governor Evers has proposed overall by about 60% on his $1.4 billion investment in our kids and in our schools and in our future is just as ridiculous. It's frustrating because it's almost like the Republicans have not heard, didn't pay attention to the elections. Tony Evers campaigned first and foremost throughout the entire campaign on making sure our public schools were made whole. That's where he started building his budget. That's how he built his budget. And he won the election. Scott Walker didn't. Scott Walker campaigned on Foxconn. Tony Evers campaigned on our public schools. Tony won. So it's incumbent upon the Republicans to work with the governor rather than throw out a $500 million package and hopefully, people won't pay attention and they'll pass it and everything's going to be fine and dandy. Well, I'm telling you, it's not going to be. The amount of referendums that have passed over the past few years just for cost to continue and keep the doors open by local school districts has been staggering. And Governor Evers recognizes that. So there's a clear choice today. We can invest in our kids, invest in our teachers, and invest in our future, or we can take a giant step backwards. The Republicans are proposing a giant step backwards. Chris.
Yes. Well, hello, everybody. I approach this issue of public education not just as a policymaker, but as a mom of two children in public school. And I can tell you it has been a very hard 8 years for our public schools. They have had uncertainty, they have had erratic funding, they had the biggest cut in the history of the state of Wisconsin, which we're still not back from, by the way. Even to get back to where we were in 2011, we would need another $225 million when adjusted for inflation. So this has been a long, hard road for our children. And that's one of the reasons an education governor was elected, right? We know that. We saw the Marquette poll in August of 2018, which showed that people were extremely concerned about public education. Almost half of the people said, we think our schools are worse off. And they were right about that, because under 8 years of Republican domination with cutting and gutting budgets, they have been worse off. And so this governor comes along and makes funding public education in an aggressive, robust way to the tune of $1.4 billion, the cornerstone of this budget. And we heard all over this state, it didn't matter what school district we were in, rural, suburban, even urban, people came out and said, please, they begged us to pass Governor Evers the people's budget. This is the people's budget, you all. These are the priorities of the people. And Governor Evers and the Democrats standing up today, we are going to fight. We will never back down from advocating for the priorities of the people. And that starts right here with making sure that we are funding public education. Republicans are making a choice, and it is not for our children. They have made a choice to preserve $1.1 billion in tax cuts for the most wealthy elite in our state, rather than fund what our kids need and what our schools need to be successful. Just this last November, 77 referendums passed. People raised their own taxes by about $1.4 billion, almost the exact number this governor wants to invest. We know that schools have transferred in 1 year, we have a fiscal bureau memo, in 1 year, schools are having to transfer $1 billion in general revenue to cover costs of special education. We know that. We have a fiscal bureau memo. And that was from 2016. It's more now. It's more now. So, that is a top priority of people. Under Governor Evers, the people's budget, look at the investments. These are the investments in the public schools represented by JFC Republicans. Every school district is going to benefit from Governor Evers' investment. And yet, once again, my Republican colleagues are turning the people's budget into the politician's budget and not listening to the people of the state, not standing up for our kids, and leaving our public schools behind.
Thank you. There's no elected official in the state of Wisconsin that has more experience and credibility on education policy than Governor Tony Evers. He's been a teacher, a principal, a district administrator, statewide superintendent of public schools, and now governor. We didn't arrive at this budget proposal on accident. This isn't the result of a few hours in a locked door on a Wednesday night in the state capitol. This is a budget that has been crafted over decades of experience. As Representative Taylor just pointed out, and I would just draw everyone's attention to the chart to my left, the budget as proposed by Governor Evers doesn't pick winners and losers. It invests in rural schools, suburban schools, and urban school districts. That reflects the governor's experience working in small school districts, medium and large. But I want to just highlight, and I want to say thank you to a number of the members of the press that are here today that have done a lot of hard work getting to the core of the difference between the two parties that will really be highlighted today, and that's special education funding. There is no bigger difference between the Democratic position and the Republican position today than special education funding. The governor's budget, as I mentioned, invests in school students in all areas of the state, but also of all abilities. And in the joint finance process, we heard from school districts in every single corner of the state explaining this problem with the low reimbursement rate of special education funding. And as Representative Taylor just mentioned, the hole that the low reimbursement rate has created for school districts around the state is $1 billion. And the governor's budget begins to recognize that with a historic investment in special education of over $600 million. We support that investment. Our kids of all abilities are worth that investment. They're worth that 60%, nothing less. And you'll see that clear difference today. I want to turn the podium over to my friend and my state senator, LaTanya Johnson.
Our Republican colleagues are making this budget about winners and losers, and they're doing this with our children. This budget should not be about false choices. We have the opportunity to make sure that every child in this state gets the resources that they need to have a quality education. But our Republican colleagues think that that is too much. It's too much to make adequate investments in our schools for our children. We hear all the time in this building about welfare reform and welfare programs and disgruntled colleagues about taking care of the poor, when we know that education is the one thing that is guaranteed to lift our children out of poverty. And if we can adequately educate our children and give them a quality education, it not only benefits them, but future generations. We need to make sure that we are not pitting our schools against each other, that we are not pitting our special needs children against those children that don't have IEPs, because they both deserve quality education. But that is exactly what we are doing when we fail to properly fund our special education programs, and then the schools have to take resources from other budgets in their districts. We want to make sure that our children understand that there is no more important responsibility as legislators in this body than to make sure that they get quality education. It's not a choice when we have to remove children from their neighborhoods and send them to schools in other districts because the schools in their own neighborhoods are subpar or substandard. That's not a choice. When we have the opportunity to make investments in those schools, to make sure that there is fairness among every school district in this state. But that is not what we choose to do in this body. These are our children. They're our responsibility. When we took these positions to make life better for all Wisconsinites, regardless of whether that's a child who needs an IEP or a child in a rural area that's struggling and needs access to broadband, or whether that's an inner city child who's struggling because they're hungry and they haven't had breakfast. We want to make sure that our school system provide the services that's needed to make sure that our children thrive. And what we're seeing in these proposed budgets don't do that. It doesn't provide fairness, it doesn't provide equity, and it most certainly doesn't make every child in this state a winner. And now we'll open it up to any questions.
When Republican lawmakers say that they're going to increase school funding by $500 million to a lot of Wisconsinites outside this building, that probably sounds like a lot of money. Why is it not enough for our schools?
Well, if you take a look just at special education costs and how much they've gone up, and the fact that we're still hovering around 25%, and they have to collectively transfer over $1 billion into their special education programs, we are not funding schools enough. When property taxpayers across the state are choosing to raise their property taxes by about the same amount of money that Governor Evers is proposing to plug into K-12 education, the state is not living up to its responsibility to make sure that our public schools have the money they need for the jobs that they are supposed to do. So under the last 8 years, as Chris pointed out and others have pointed out, K-12 education has absolutely suffered because we've been cutting taxes for the wealthiest here in Wisconsin. We have been giving hundreds of millions of dollars to unaccountable foreign-owned corporations. And our schools have suffered. School districts have had to spackle, patch, duct tape, put together budgets that they try to make as fair as they possibly can do and do the best job that they possibly can do, but the state has always left them short financially. Now we have a governor whose background is education, who recognizes what investing in our public schools means, not only to Wisconsin right now, but the Wisconsin in the future. And he's done the right thing. And the Republicans to cut it, to give him, in the case of special education, less than 75% of what he's asked for, is a slap in the face. Not to the governor, but to the taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin and the people who put him in office under the guise that public education is going to come first.
Yeah, and I would say that the people of this state, I'm sure, would rather see the investment, $1.4 billion investment in public education, than $1.1 billion going to the most wealthy elite in our state. So it's a priority that the Republicans are making. They're prioritizing tax cuts for millionaires over fully funding our schools. And that's what our schools are saying, and that's what their schools are saying. Their schools have gone to referendum. Senator Markline, just last year, you know how many referendum were in his district? I was shocked when I looked at this. About 17 referendum. You know how many passed? 16 referendum. Our schools are saying loud and clear, this 8 years of inadequate funding of the cuts have taken their toll. And they are telling us we need this investment. And you can go to any school district in this state, and they will tell you the same thing.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks.